Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Vengeance Factor, which is episode 9 of season 3 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek as, I was going to say as requested by my viewers, but I stopped doing that. I'm doing it one episode at a time. Don't know why I called that back. Doing episodes of Next Generation one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the episode The Vengeance Factor. So the Vengeance Factor is when the Enterprise discovers that a neurotic group of raiders known as the Gatherers are raiding Federation outposts and phasering people. They decide to intercede and go to the homeworld of the Gatherers that were kicked out of that homeworld for being stuck up in these clan wars that tore the world apart. And they insist to the leader, Sovereign Maruk, that she reconcile with the Gatherers and bring them back to their homeworld. And so Maruk joins Picard on a mission to negotiate a peace treaty with the Gatherers that lead them to the leader of the Gatherers, Chorgon. However, in the meantime, Maruk's cook or chef, a young lady named Yuta, sparks up a romance with Commander Riker, and she talks about how she is just a servant, and it finds out that she is actually killing members of the Gatherers because she had de-aged herself 100 years ago, made it so, or 53 years ago, made it so that she never aged. I think it was 100 years ago anyway, so that she could go on a mission to wipe out all the members of the clan that killed her clan. And it turns out the only remaining living member of that clan she's trying to wipe out is Chorgon, the leader of the Gatherers. So when Riker finds this out when she's on Chorgon's ship and just about to kill him, and begs her to stop, but she refuses to stop, so he kills her. Then it's implied that the peace treaty with the Gatherers had gone forward as expected, and Picard says that they should all take a rest, and Riker just looks depressed and is not really interested in that. So, I guess I'll start with the fact that this is going to be another one of those unpopular opinion reviews. For me, my unpopular opinion, because I really like this episode, always have. And it is not a very well-liked episode. I just went as one of the lowest rated episodes of season 3. I think it's tied with, I couldn't remember. On IMDb, it was tied with two other episodes. I think Menage a Troy and, I can't remember what the other episode is, for second to worst episode of the season. The Price was actually listed as the worst. It had a 6.3, where this one had a 6.5. Both, by the way, not terrible ratings. Like, there are episodes in TNG that has way worse, on IMDb that have way worse ratings than that. But still, a lot of people do hold this up as one of the worst episodes of season 3. And I've watched several reviews where they specifically said this was easily the worst episode of season 3. So, to me, the comparison I would make of how I feel about this episode compared to how the rest of the fandom feels about the episode is the episode Alternative Factor. Now, if anyone watching this is familiar with my channel, they know that I actually really love the episode The Alternative Factor from the original series, which is by and large by the fan base considered to be one of the worst episodes of the original series. It almost inevitably makes anyone's top 5 worst list. In fact, I've seen it top the number 1 on many people's worst lists. And I had it in my top 10 best list, and I made no apologies for that because I think everyone else is wrong, and I made a video detailing why exactly I think they're wrong. Several videos. But anyway, I compare it a lot to The Alternative Factor because when I was 14 years old, I think 14, but around that time, The Alternative Factor was my favorite original series episode, and The Vengeance Factor was my favorite Next Generation episode. It's funny, they both had the word factor in it. That's just a wild coincidence. But anyway, I remember when I was a teenager, I wanted to aspiring writer, so I thought as an exercise I would adapt Star Trek episode, try to write it, not thinking I would ever do anything, but just as an exercise to sort of craft my writing skills. It didn't quite work. They were still quite bad. But the two episodes I tried to adapt was The Alternative Factor and The Vengeance Factor, because they were two of my favorite episodes. Now, as I got older, I didn't see them as my favorite episodes anymore. I kind of changed my mind on them a little bit, and they kind of dropped a bit. The Alternative Factor remained in my top 10 for the original series, where this episode will definitely not be anywhere near my top 10 for TNG, but that has more to do with the original series doesn't have as many good episodes, where TNG has a lot more good episodes, at least in my opinion, episodes I like way better than this one. But I still really like this episode, and I still heavily disagree with people who don't like this episode. And it's funny because it also mirrors The Alternative Factor in terms of when I watch other people's reasoning or read about their reasonings on why specifically they don't like this episode, I disagree with them. Because, let me make this clear, there's a lot of episodes that I like that maybe other people don't like, and I'll watch a review or read something about it, and they say, give reasons why they don't like it. I'll be like, okay, I disagree with you, but that's fair. That's your opinion. You can go ahead and think that. I don't think that way. I personally think you're wrong, but you're, entitled to your opinion. And, the other way around, too. There could be episodes that I really don't like that other people like, that I'll read about it and be like, okay, that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. I disagree with that, but you're entitled to it. But there's some cases where, particularly I was watching several videos reviewing this episode, where I was actively shouting out, no, that's wrong, no, actually no, where it's not a fact of, well, that's your opinion and I respect it. It's more the fact you are objectively wrong. You are saying stuff that is wrong. It's not true, and it makes me want to argue about it, which is what I did with The Alternative Factor. Mainly, my arguments were not that they were wrong, but that their complaints could apply to the entire original series, so I don't really get why they're singling out this episode. Oh, it's overacting. Like, have you seen the original series? Oh, it's junk science. Like, have you really seen the original series? And the fact that they would point to that episode as junk science and not the one where a giant hand grabs the Enterprise in space, or Abraham Lincoln is floating in space right in front of them, like, those are fine, but somehow someone traveling between two different parallel universes, that's total junk science. Like, I really don't get that. That will be something that puzzles me that really boggles my mind to the day I die. Why are they singling out this episode, which is actually really interesting, has a fascinating concept, has a very awesome bittersweet ending? Why are they... Okay, now I'm ranting about the Alternative Factor, which this episode is for me to rant about the Vengeance Factor, because it's the same deal where I've heard arguments against this episode. I'm like, but no, that's actually not true. Like, for example, this one video I was watching was saying that, Picard is, upending and totally changing the status quo and taking over a planet and forcing them to change their entire way of life just because he's pissed off that they're interrupting his day and attack the Federation outpost. That is objectively wrong. That's not what happened in this episode. What happened is when Picard saw that they phasered these Federation scientists, nearly killed them and ripped their station dry, he saw that as a sign as the last straw of, okay, we need to do something about this problem. This problem has been affecting everyone in that region, not just the Federation. Everyone's benefacting it. And yeah, it was when the Federation was attacked when he finally decided to get involved. But that makes sense because he's a part of the Federation. And he's doing it to help serve everyone. And what he's doing is not fundamentally forcing the society to change their lives. He is negotiating with the leader of this world and with the leader of the gatherers and pointing out the fact that it is to their mutual benefit to make peace, and it would their peace would not only bring security to the entire region, but also bring security and enlighten this and make life better for both parties involved. So it is the absolute right thing to do, and so that argument just pissed me off. It was so objectively wrong. Picard is doing the right thing. He's being a good negotiator. He's being a good Starfleet officer here. And I'm trying to think of what the other arguments against this episode is. Now, I will say up front, there is one main argument that I often hear people give that is correct. It is a valid argument that I, in fact, agree with, and is the one thing that really bothers me about this episode. But it's not a deal breaker for me. It seems to be a deal breaker for a lot of people. Well, that, combined with all this other stuff they complain about, which I don't see anything wrong with. Yeah. So yeah, and I'll get to that later. But but if you're thinking of the one thing that's like, yeah, I agree that was a plot hole and doesn't make any sense, but it's not a deal breaker for me. Because there's just so many things good about this episode. Now, other opinions I heard that I disagree with is that, the love story didn't work, the love interest was dumb, and I don't know, I didn't write down all the things that were outright said that I was like, no, that's not true. It was just a little bit annoying to me to hear some of, just like it was when I researched the alternative factor, a little bit annoying to me to hear what some people who are objectively wrong are saying of why they don't like this episode. Now, let me tell you why I do like this episode. This is something that, and maybe I will admit, in the same case that I did with the alternative factor, part of it has to do with nostalgia. And I think the reason why people don't like the alternative factor has to do with nostalgia too. The fact that they never really liked or understood that episode when they were a kid, therefore they had no nostalgia for it. So they're perfectly fine with, the hand floating in space, or a giant amoeba eating the galaxy, or like a fat guy pimping off hot chicks that the crew inadvertently act like idiots and drool over for no reason. Okay with all those episodes, but not okay with a guy traveling between two parallel universes trying to destroy a universe. I mean, that's such an awesome story. But anyway, God, I get off topic whenever I talk about the alternative factor, and I will never apologize. People try to be like, oh yeah, make fun of me for being ridiculous for liking the alternative factor. I'll make fun of you. I don't care if you're in the majority. It's a good episode, god damn it. But anyway, sorry. Getting off topic again. So with the vengeance factor, I have the same sort of nostalgia I did for the alternative factor. That it was one of my favorite episodes, if not my favorite TNG episode when I was younger. Of course, that didn't hold for very long. And maybe I never considered it my number one favorite. Maybe I was just up there. Maybe I would consider it the most underrated episode. And I still consider it an underrated episode. I can't remember if I put it in my top 10 underrated episodes. If I didn't, I should have. But the main reason why this episode connected to me when I was that age is because I'm really interested in what really draws me is the tragic love story. the love story where, not like a Romeo and Juliet kind of tragedy, but the tragedy of a romance that never really happened and was struck down before it really went anywhere due to tragic circumstances. Like the movie I'm thinking of that I used to watch around the same time a lot that I loved was The Terminator, the first one, which I still think is better than the second one. And because in that movie you had Kyle Reese, who had never experienced love in his life, and he traveled back in time to, save his good friend's mother, and he found that love that he never had, and found someone who understood him, and became his good friend's father, and was the whole time apparently, and but then was killed before he can enjoy any life with her. So it was tragic, and that she found this, man who was amazing, and he died almost immediately after. And so that's a tragic love story that never really came to be. And that's part of why I like that movie so much, and that's why I like it better than Terminator 2, is that specific storyline. And I think there were other things too that I can't remember that I liked, had that similar aspect. And so that's what I got from the storyline with Riker and Utah. And I think this really stands out from most of the Romance of the Week episodes of Star Trek, particularly the Riker ones, which are kind of dumb and just throwaway and just him being horny or whatever. Whereas the way it was portrayed in this episode wasn't just Riker wants to get it on. It felt like the way they portrayed it showed that there was a deeper connection between them, and that he generally wanted to make her life better. And I think the conversations between them about how Riker prefers equals, and how he wasn't okay when she was just like, oh, tell me whatever you want, I just want to pleasure you, which, the way the horn dog Riker's portrayed in most episodes, you think he'd be okay with that, but he's not. And I think that has a lot to do with he wants something deeper with her, and the fact that and the tragedy that they play with her, that is discovered, uncovered later on, about her being, altered for this mission to kill off these clan members, and so she feels like her life isn't her own. But Riker doesn't really understand the implications of that. He kind of misunderstands it to think that she's some sort of slave or indentured servant to Maruk, which the way she talks makes it sound that way, but if you know the underlying story behind her, she's really talking about how she's enslaved to her clan, to her mission to kill off this other clan. And so there's a real tragedy there when he just wants to help her, and he just wants to pull her away from that life. And then when he finds out that she is in fact the person that they're hunting for, the murderer who's about to commit another murder, and he has to go over and stop her, he tries to talk her out of it, but it doesn't work, and he's left with no choice but to kill her. Now, this is touching on the issue I have, which I'll get to later, but let's just go with it for now, that he had to kill her. And that's really tragic. And I think the actress who plays Judah does an amazing job. I think both Jonathan Frakes and her do a really good job of selling the tragedy of the moment. And it's something that I really, really buy. And it's something I felt very emotionally impactful. It was something that was and I used to love depressing stuff when I was that age too, and this was kind of depressing to me. It was kind of hit me in the feels in that tragic love story sense, mainly because I think both actors do just such a great job of pulling this off. Now, I was told that some people say that part of the reason why they don't like this episode is the acting's not very good. And I will say not every guest actor in this is great. I will talk about Brule later on. I think that he has questionable acting. But I think Sovereign Maruk actually does a really good job. She gives a good performance. I think Chorgon gives a passable performance. Like, he's fine. And Yuta, I think, does an amazing job. So I think the good performances outweigh the bad, in my opinion. And the other reasons why I like this episode is the world building. That's the other huge one for me. I'm a fan of like interesting world building that stacks up and that makes sense. This is part of the reason why I hated the Star Wars sequel trilogy, particularly. I'm gonna want to make a whole video about this one day, but The Force Awakens is, many people call that the best of the sequel trilogy, and I think that is clearly the worst. It's the one that set the stage and ruined made it so it was impossible for the other two movies to be good because there was no world building. World building is a very important thing to me. So when I see an episode like this that's only 45 minutes long, that creates builds this whole world, this whole scenario that I find fascinating, I think that's super impressive. And I think the concept of the Gatherers and the Acromarians and them needing to reconcile was a fascinating concept. And I think the way they explored this concept through showing Picard as an amazing diplomat, which, by the way, is something that Season 3 is establishing. That wasn't really, it kind of touched on in Season 1, but not really. He tried to do diplomacy with those people in Code of Honor, and his idea of diplomacy was capitulation. Sorry, can't pronounce that word. Is to capitulate to them. That was his idea of the diplomacy. Oh, you want to kidnap my chief of security? Well, thank you for doing that. You're so great. Bow to you now. Please accept my treaty. No, that was bullshit. And then, of course, let's not even talk about Lonely Among Us, where his idea of diplomacy would be like, oh, so one of the delegates is murdering another delegate on my ship during my watch. So my response to that is, why the fuck are you telling me about this? God damn it, leave me alone. Go deal with this shit and stop bugging me with your nonsense. Sorry, I'm never going to get over that. So Season 3 is doing a way better job of, like, through the Shellyak and now through this one, of showing Picard as this master, like, negotiator and diplomat. And I love that. And this, to me, is one of the great examples of that, where we see him. And I think, and again, this is touching on some of the stuff that people were saying that I think they're objectively wrong on, where he was like forcing Maruk and sort of gaslighting her or whatever and forcing her, which is bullshit. He was being a great diplomat and a great negotiator. And, yeah, like the scene where he caught up to Chorgon's ship and Chorgon was like firing on the Enterprise, and his response was just to, instantly take down the shields with one shot, and then be like, we're being went aboard to negotiate, whether you like it or not, and just hangs up on him and like beams over there. Like, that's ballsy, because as Chorgon himself points out, he could take them hostage, because Picard says to Riker, he's like, they're not going to do anything rash when our phasers are targeted on his ship, but they could always take him hostage. The fact that they have phasers targeted on the ship is not going to stop that, because they could be like, if you fire on us, well, you'll kill your captain too, or we'll kill him if you try to take any action, which is what happened in the Samaritan snare. So that was a really risky, really ballsy move, but it paid off because he knew that he could convince Chorgon that this would be the best thing for him, and he was right. So that's another huge reason why I really like this episode, is the world building. So yeah, it's mainly those two things, and then watching it again, I'm like reaffirmed that those two things really work in this episode, and they really do shine through any sort of faults this episode would have. Now, another complaint I've heard is that when the show shows the audience that Yuta kills that old guy, I can't remember his name, and the old gatherer, then it kind of takes away from the mystery, because then after that we see Crusher investigating who killed this guy, and we, the audience, already know, so therefore it's boring, and therefore they shouldn't have revealed, and therefore it seems like a complete another waste of time. Why are we showing these scenes of Crusher investigating who killed the old dude when we already know who it was? And that's why I disagree. I think that's bullshit. Now, I think there are examples, like, for example, the episode Violations in Season 5, which I'll get to eventually, where they make it very clear through the music and the creepy way this guy does. Like, in the very first scene, even before he commits any crimes, you know he's the bad guy. And so then when someone commits crimes, you know it's him. And they show you on screen that it clearly is him. And then the other characters act like they don't know, and they act like it's this big shocking thing when they finally find out it's him. So, and you're like, well, why did you make it very clear from the beginning it was him? It kind of defeats the whole purpose. And in that case, I agree. I think that was a really bad thing to do, and it kind of ruined the episode. In this case, I don't agree. In this case, I actually think it was smart. And I'm actually glad. I think it's actually great writing and a very smart decision to actually show Yuta killing that guy and not try to play it off like, oh, who did it? I don't know. Because, for one thing, I think it would be fucking obvious it was Yuta. From the way we're focusing on her and the strange way she's behaving, I feel like the writers would be treating me like an idiot by pretending like I don't already know that it's Yuta. So I'm glad they don't. I'm glad they don't treat me like an idiot. I'm glad they say, yeah, you'll figure this out anyway, so we'll just show it to you, which is a smart thing to do. And I talk about this a lot, too, that there's a lot of examples of stories where they try to pull the wool over your eyes to have this twist, but by doing so, they sacrifice good storytelling. That if they were upfront with what happened the entire time, they could have done a much better job at building. And this is something I learned in writing classes too. You don't always want to withhold information, because sometimes it makes more sense and can lead to better, more sophisticated storytelling if you actually reveal it immediately and not withhold it for a twist. Not try to do a ha moment and reveal it up front. That way you can explore how it is more. And I think this is a prime example of that, because the fact that they up front tell you that it was Yuta that killed the dude, then it makes sense while you're watching those scenes that the way Yuta's behaving, how she's talking about her quest. And by the way, they show Yuta killing that dude, but they say that's because she's of this clan and she's going to hunt down that clan, but you don't know any of the backstory. So you don't know that she was like de-aged and that she's over 100 years old, and that her whole mission in life was to wipe out this one clan that was, because they wiped out her clan and all the members of her clan are dead, and all that. So you don't know all the details. So this is why I disagree with the criticism that the scene where we see like Riker and Crusher and Data, looking over the records of the clans of Archimerion and figuring out it was Yuta, they think that scene was a waste of time. I don't. I think that was an amazing scene because it gives us that added backstory of what exactly was going on with her. And it was, like, to me, quite a shocking moment where when Riker says 53 years and she hasn't aged a day. Like, that was a great moment for me. And also I've heard people criticize the music in this episode, and I like the music. I forgot to criticize the music in the episode The Price, which I don't like that music, and that was a Ron Jones. This one's Dennis McCarthy. It just proves again I like Dennis McCarthy better than Ron Jones. But anyway, move on from that. I know I bring this up a lot, but I'm going to continue to bring it up a lot because I'm sick of other people saying that Ron Jones is way better than Dennis McCarthy, which I think they're objectively wrong. But anyway, maybe not objectively wrong. Maybe it's just my opinion. Maybe it's a matter of taste. But anywho. So yeah, that was a great scene. And I was just thinking, I was talking about music because I was thinking of the music they played when Riker said that 53 years old and she hasn't aged a day. I think that was great music. But anyway, so yeah, and the scene where Crusher is like, figuring this out in sick bay and sort of talking to Riker about, oh, he didn't really die of a heart attack, he was murdered. And some other people are like, oh, the music played like, da da da, oh my God, he was murdered, but we already know that. No, what the music is telling you is that they don't fucking know that. Like, Riker and Crusher don't know that. It's not about what you know, it's about what they know, and they didn't know that, and they're figuring out. So yeah, it is a suspenseful, it is a meaningful moment, even though we, the audience, are not being told anything we don't already know, but the characters involved are being told things they don't know, and that's why it's important. Which again works in this episode but doesn't work in Violations because it was mishandled. Where here it is totally handled correctly because it's an interesting narrative choice because we get this bird's eye view, the God's eye view of knowing certain things that the characters don't. And sometimes, if done correctly, that can work. Sometimes, if done incorrectly, that can be frustrating and doesn't work, like Violations, and there's many other examples too. But when done correctly, like in this case, it can really work. Because why I keep saying it's done correctly is because we are able to understand Yuta better. We're able to understand what's preventing her from connecting with Commander Riker. And as I said, that's what makes this episode so great. The tragic love story. It wouldn't have worked as well if they were withholding the information. Oh, I don't know who did it. It's obviously her. Why are you treating me like an idiot? And it would have taken away from those powerful scenes that we get between Riker and Yuta. First of all, I think the way they built up the romance with, him trying the food dish and him saying, oh yes, Parthus Aliyuta and all that stuff. I think that was great. Most romance of the weeks do not have those smart building blocks to start with simple stuff like that. And then they lead into the very powerful tragic scene where she's talking about how when Riker says, I want to pleasure you just as much as you want to pleasure me, and don't think too much about that, but anyway, and she's like, I can't feel pleasure or pain, I haven't been able to in a long time, and she just looks away and looks distant. Riker's confused, he doesn't really understand what's going on, but we the audience do understand, and that's what makes this scene so damn powerful. I'm so glad that they reveal. It was very intelligent, it was very smart storytelling to reveal early on that she in fact is the murderer, but not the specific details, and which, by the way, is also the reason why that that music where the dun 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 works, because we don't know exactly why she's doing it, and so that's why it's so powerful when they deduce that. Now, let me touch on another complaint that I heard that I disagree with, is that when Data figures out by seeing a piece of Yuta's forehead, and Riker's like, well, I don't get it, what's the connection? And they're able to show the computer extrapolate, they remove what's his face, these two other guys blocking it, and reconstruct the face, and it's clearly Yuta. And they're like, aha. Now, and I think they brought up, I can't remember what movie, but some movie that does this as well, where they, take a photo and extrapolate and remove it, and they're like, oh, that's not how photos work. That's not how photography works. This is bullshit. And my response to that is, that's not how photos work. That's not how photography works. Today! We're not in today. This is taking place in the 24th century. And it's probably not just a photograph. It's probably not someone with a fucking Polaroid going, or this big thing with the light on it going, smile. It's a fucking futuristic digital technology that is taking this photo in the first place. And so futuristic digital technology would most often work differently than modern day photography. Ugh! That one annoys me. I'm sorry. And you might think of this as a weird, geeky explanation, but I'm sorry. There are some things in Star Trek where you can hand wave away by future technology. And this is one of them. Clearly, this is one of them. So I'm sorry. That one annoyed me. But anyway. Anywho, so I guess I'll talk about what I didn't like about this episode. So first, let me talk about the acting, because I brought up Brule. He doesn't do a very good job. And it's funny because not everyone who disliked this episode mentioned that. Some people liked his acting job, but I don't think it was terrible, but maybe it's part of me seeing this episode so many goddamn times that his reading of the lines feels telegraphed. Like, it seems fake and unnatural. Like, for example, when he's talking to Wesley, and Wesley says, "Oh, you steal," and he you're a thief or whatever, and he's like, "I steal to survive, not because I enjoy it." Like, that line reading felt unnatural, and just not just that one, but that was a prime example. But a lot of times where he was like just going off and yelling or whatever and saying and just. It felt unnatural. It felt like he was reciting lines and like being over the top, and it didn't seem like a natural way that someone would behave. And also, like, the scene where he's on the bridge and hanging over Wesley and telling him to set these coordinates. It's like, "You're not afraid of the two rocks?" Like, his physical movements seem very wrong. And this may be the director's fault, because maybe he blocked the scene wrong. But the way that he's hunched over Wesley, he looks very uncomfortable. And I have a feeling, like, I can almost tell just by watching this scene that the actor was uncomfortable when performing this scene. And it shows. and so it makes it look awkward and uncomfortable, and I feel like maybe the director told him to do that for certain, like, cinematic reasons, just so you get a shot a certain way or something, because he looks damn uncomfortable and it looks awkward, especially when he like slaps Wesley in the back. "Oh, you're afraid of a few rocks?" Like, I didn't buy that. That looked very unnatural. But as far as people who say that Chorgon's a bad actor, I disagree with them. I think Chorgon was fine. But hold on, before you get into Chorgon, I gotta finish talking about Brule, because there is one thing that I actually do like, and again, other people may disagree with or didn't like. I do like it. Is when he comes on board the Enterprise and onto the bridge, and he's like, when he sees Wesley at the helm, and it's like, "A child? This doesn't inspire confidence, Picard." And Picard just glares at him with the evilest evil eye. And here's the thing. I side with Brule on this one. I agree with Brule. I think he's that reaction is totally valid. To be like, you got a 15-year-old at your bridge, like, you have like this huge powerful starship with like thousands of trained officers and experts who went through academy and know all this stuff, and you have this like huge, gigantic, powerful, like the flagship of the Federation. You have a fucking 16-year-old flying it. Like, seriously, what the fuck? And he's right. He is correct. The fact that Wesley is flying the ship is fucking ridiculous, and I think I'm glad that a character finally pointed this out. I'm sorry, Picard is completely wrong to shoot him the evil eye. Brule is correct. I completely side with Brule. But anyway, back to Chorgon. Do we look like farmers to you? I'm sorry. I noticed I was almost like could quote the words before they said it, because I've seen this episode so many times. But anyway, Chorgan, I like him, and I think he does a good job. Now, but I do want to sort of sidetrack myself a little bit, because after I saw this episode, I saw this B movie on like Cinemax, I think. It was called The Pit and the Pendulum, and yes, I believe it was based off of the Edgar Allan Poe poem or short story. But it's a really cheesy B-movie horror movie, so I think that they didn't follow the adaptation perfectly. So, like, as I was watching it, it was such a cheesy movie. I'm like, there's no way this is being remotely faithful to Edgar Allan Poe. But I don't know. I never read the original short story or poem. I don't even know if it was a short story or poem. So maybe they were. But anyway, this actor was in it, the guy who plays Chorgan, and I was like, hey, it's Chorgan. And so every time I watched this episode, I was like, that's what I know him from. I know him from this cheesy B movie. But out of curiosity, I was looking this up on IMDb to see who else is in this movie, and it had Lance Hendrickson, who played Bishop in Aliens, was the star of this movie. He was the main character. And it has Mark Margolis, a.k.a. God, what's his name? The dude from Breaking Bad that hits the bell. Salamanca. God, what's his first name? Can't believe I'm spacing on his name. I'm a very bad Breaking Bad fan. God, this is gonna eat at me. Now I'm gonna have to figure this out. Yeah, the dude that hits the bell. What's his name? Hector. God damn it, of course. Hector Salamanca. So he's in this movie. And also Jeffrey Combs. Jeffrey Combs is in this movie, and apparently it's because this movie is by the same guy who did The Reanimator, which Jeffrey Combs was in, so I'm sure he just brought him back for that. So it's got Hector Salamanca, Jeffrey Combs, and Lance Hendrickson, and Chorgan in this movie. So I really want to see this movie now. Oh, it also has the old woman who played Happy Gilmore's grandmother in Happy Gilmore. And was she I think she was also in an episode of Seinfeld where, like, Jerry, like, said, shut up, you old bag, and stole something from her. Pretty sure that was her. So all these people in this movie, so I have to watch this movie now. I know this movie is terrible, and it's a shitty, stupid horror B movie from 1991, but now I really want to watch it. I don't know why. But anyway, that is a huge aside, as I said it would be. But getting back to Chorgan, I think, was fine. And I like the negotiations with them and I think Picard is really awesome, by the way, in these scenes of negotiating, because he's come with Maruk, but he's making it clear he's not on her side, that he is a mediator, that when Chorgan points out something that's valid, he points it out to Maruk, and so he is being a really good mediator, and that's another thing I love. Like, we demand autonomy, and Picard's like, there are many, or Picard's like, he's showing that he's willing to negotiate, and that's a damn good point. And so Maruk is like, well, there are many levels of autonomy. Surely your group is entitled to some. Anyway, I'm sorry, I could just quote this episode. But anyway, so I like that. Like, that's cool. That's like good negotiating scenes. Like, I love these scenes between them. And like the yelling scenes when they're like, we want 3 seats on the ruling council. It's like, no group has 3 seats. It's like, I don't care what others have. You only care about what you can take. Sorry, as I said, I could just quote this episode all day because it's good. good. Like, I think that's good. I love it. I think the acting's good. The dialogue's good. It's a good portrayal of Picard and what negotiations are good world building. Like, the dynamic, complex world building they're able to shove in this 45-minute episode really, really impresses me. Anyway, I thought I said I'd talk about what I didn't like. No, I ended up back on the topic of what I did like. So, let me get into the big thing, the big complaint that everyone has about this episode that is in fact valid, and it is one of my complaints as well. Riker kills Yuta. So, Yuta is about to kill Chorgon. All she has to do is touch him. And so Riker stuns her and says, stop. And tries to talk her down. And again, this part of it is tragic, the way he's trying to convince her. And she's like, no, it isn't murder. It's justice. And about how my life ended and my quest began. And it's all about her trying to, finish off and kill this last person she needs to kill. So he stuns her again. And she's like hurt, and she like leans back and holding on to the table for support, like she's barely able to stand. And then he says, Yuta, don't do this. And she goes for it again, and then he vaporizes her. I got a question. Why didn't you just stun her again? The last time you stunned her, like, she barely was able to withstand it. She was like holding onto the table for support. If you did that same setting again, you'd probably knock her out, and then you could take her, beam on the Enterprise, put her into custody. Why did you raise the level on your phaser to vaporize? Why? That makes zero sense. And this is a very huge plot hole. This is why everyone points it out, because they should. And this is something that really gets to me as well. But, it's, as I said, it's not a deal breaker for me. The rest of this episode is so good, handled so well, it doesn't ruin it for me. But it is there. It is a bad thing. And I could come up with some headcanon to explain, maybe, I don't even think of it, but I'm sure there could be some headcanon out there. Like, maybe if he hit her with that stun setting again, it would have killed her in a more sort of brutal way, and he was being kind of merciful by just vaporizing her instead and sparing her the pain of dying a painful death. That's very flimsy. That is a very flimsy excuse, because surely they would be able to save her. But anyway, or maybe, I don't know. I can't even think of anything. It just doesn't make any sense why he would do this. But even if you could come up with headcanon that does make sense, it's not in the episode, and it needs, especially if you're going to have something like that, inconsistent, nonsensical, you need to explain it. You need to explain yourself. Why the hell did he vaporize her? Other than dramatic effect. Not a real reason. And so I can understand, because part of why I love this episode is a tragic love story, and it is, the ending of the love story is a bit contrived because he kills her when he doesn't need to. But I'm willing to hand wave this giant plot hole away because the rest of the episode works so well, and the rest of the love story works so well. So my headcanon is, I don't give a shit that it's there. I still love this episode. Call me irrational for having that, but I think it is consistent, because you might say, it's inconsistent because you bitch about all these plot holes and all these other episodes, but you don't care about it here. But all those other episodes, are bad in addition to that. This just makes the plot hole worse. When you have a really good episode and there's one nagging thing, I'm willing to overlook it. And that's the same thing for episodes like Past Tense. It uses the worst time travel logic imaginable, but such a great episode otherwise, I'm willing to look right past it. But I still point it out. I still acknowledge that it's there, unlike these frustrating people who try to pretend like plot holes aren't plot holes. Anyway, so I acknowledge it's there, but I don't let it interfere with how much I like this episode. Yeah, I think there's more I could say about the negotiating and how great the world building is with the gatherers and specific moments that work. But I've talked for long enough. So now let me thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It is extremely, very much appreciated. It helps me continue with this channel, and I'm very humbled and very thankful for all your support. So I will just give those that support me a shout out. So we have Tetson, Greg Marley, Francisco Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Many Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Miguelicio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neilhouse. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we have a couple of comments for this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, I was going to make a silly pun about this episode, but to be honest, there's nothing I can say that would be more comical than the gatherers' outfits and hair. Now that's another thing I've heard people complain about is the gatherers' outfit and hair, and it's the freaking, I was going to say 90s, but really it's 89 this episode was made, so it's still the late 80s. Come on. It's the late 80s. Actually, and I don't think that their outfits are that outrageous, to be honest. Like, I was looking at it, and I was like, no, it seems like standard Marauder pirating stuff. I don't know. That's just me. Anyway, next comment, is from Norman Buckwald, who says, yes, she lived longer and was a baddie, but considering how Riker took her out when I think he really didn't need to, makes one put in hashtag justice for Yuta. Given that, there may be a reason from this episode with respect to continuity why the audience may think that Riker not only slept with the scientist's wife, but also murdered him in a matter of perspective. Otherwise, I guess an interesting story of a different type of culture with different sects, and Picard's worked with the leader of the established government, and certainly the romance of the week for Riker took such a different turn that maybe this was why maybe Harry Kim got a ridiculous ordinance he had to deal with. Never mind STDs. As for Riker's refusing to take a break, can I be blunt? Either Picard or Crusher should have convinced him to take one. 4 dishes of revenge set at the highest disintegration setting out of 10. Yes, there's that plot hole I talked about. And to be fair, as I said, people are very right to point it out. It is a huge plot hole. But let's see. Yeah, matter of perspective, that guy he killed, also Hector Salamanca, by the way, if you didn't know. But I will get to that episode when I get to it. And I don't think it makes it, I don't know. Again, it's just a plot hole. The different sects and the different clans. Again, this is the backstory I found so fascinating. And its main, driving point of the episode was the fact, and they said this at the start of the episode, that when explaining the clan wars, is that, someone would kill someone, and so they would want revenge, and they would kill someone, and then that person would want revenge, so they would kill more people, and how dare you kill those people, we're going to kill more people, and then, and it goes back and forth. This is also touched on in the episode Battle Lines, where it doesn't matter how the dispute started, it's the fact that they're just all out for revenge, and the fact that they tied it into Yuta's storyline, where her whole thing was to completely give up her life and make her feel like her entire life is meaningless to the point where she doesn't feel pleasure. And she's just living to carry out this revenge of, I'm going to wipe out Chorgon. She even said, once Chorgon's dead, what happens to me doesn't matter. So it points out how illogical that whole tit-for-tat revenge line of thinking is. Because if she kills off his clan, but then her clan dies, then what's the fucking point? Both clans are dead ultimately. How does it really matter? And it's just a very futile way to live and to drive government and to a society. And there's a real life example happening right now where I could bring this up, but I'm not going to because I don't want to get it political, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, was Riker more upset that he had to kill Yuta or his booty call? Oh, that's harsh. I always liked this episode, and I really appreciated that we knew who killed that clan member instead of being a mystery. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for pointing that out. Worf is denied again. Hashtag let Worf fight. Did you notice when Brule was shouting at Wesley and 10 Ford, Riker and Troy were at the next table to them? I think I know why they didn't do anything to help Wesley, as they were busy discussing who is leading the booty call race in their 10-year plan. This is their 10-year plan. They break up and then they get married. My rating is 7 cardiac arrests out of 10. And as I mentioned before, it's not even a contest. Riker wins this hands down. It's not even close. But anyway. Okay, so next comment is from Ricky, who says, I've said it before that I really like this episode, and after rewatching it, I still stand by that. Granted, this isn't one of the best episodes of the show, but I think it's an underrated one. For one, I totally bought the romance between Riker and the lead female character. I could see the chemistry between them, and I was sold on this. Another thing I really liked was these aliens' conflict with the planet. I think this is one of the more fleshed out random alien episodes, and I was interested in this storyline as well. Another thing I really liked was also the murder mystery. That was great too, and I really loved how it was slowly revealed and putting the pieces together. The biggest flaw I have with this episode is Riker is shooting the girl with the phaser. He kept increasing the intensity of you noticed on the second time he stunned her, it was apparent that she was getting weaker. Therefore, when he put the intensity to the max and killed her, it was so frustrating and unnecessary. I didn't want her to die, and I believe he could have kept phasing her until she got too weak to kill the alien leader. If it ended where she didn't die, this would have been a higher rating for me, so my rating is an 8 out of 10. You know, I actually think that she should have died. Because, I agree. The way she died was terrible. It didn't make any sense. Like she didn't have to die. He could have just phasing her. But I think the fact that she did die was more powerful and a more sort of depressing ending or powerful ending for Riker, that he was forced to kill someone that he loved because she wouldn't listen to her. I just wish that the writers made a way to do it that actually made sense, because the way they did it made it seem like he unnecessarily killed her. And so if they would have found a way to make it so he did in fact have to kill her, then I think that would have been the best possible ending, but that's just me. So next comment is from Brandon Neilhouse, who says, I like this episode despite its flaws. The scientists who were attacked by the Gatherers don't even matter enough to have names, which is probably why we never hear of them after they're beamed to the Enterprise sickbay. Is it just me, or is anyone else getting strong Kai-Wen vibes off of Sovereign Maruk? They are very alike in dress and manner and hairstyle. Maruk believes the Gatherers to be a lost cause, whereas where is Ambassador Riva when you need him? It's a shame the Gatherers are a bunch of lazy, overgrown children who can't seem to take anything seriously. They don't seem to steal out of necessity just for kicks. The idea of a virus that targets such a specific target is fascinating, particularly in these times of COVID. Riker has that James Kirk glint in his eye the minute he sets eyes on Yuta. Well, no surprise there. I wanted to know the details of how Yuta was changed into an ageless assassin. The death of Yuta is a bit of a letdown and brings to mind the killing of Remick in Conspiracy. Still, I know that Riker regrets it. 7 fleshy roots out of 10 from me. So the question, where is Riva when you need him? He's probably still stuck on that planet teaching those idiots the sign language because he thought, oh yeah, he would probably be there for like 10 years trying to teach those stupid aliens the sign language. Or maybe he actually died of hypothermia because he decided to just have the Enterprise drop him off on the top of a open, cliff, open plateau hill face with absolutely no shelter to keep him sheltered from the rain or the cold. That's where I think Riva is. Now, as far as Maruk having Kai Wynn vibes, yeah, I definitely get that with her appearance, but not her behavior. Sovereign Maruk is nowhere near as annoying and as much as a cold-hearted bitch, power-hungry, despicable, piece of garbage that Kai Wynn is. Kai Wynn has the strongest get the hell off my screen vibes, where Sovereign Maruk does not. She's actually quite ill. She's quite well-tempered, I should say. She has nice manners. And yeah, she can have some of the same vibes as Kai Wynn, but not nearly to the annoying, I hate this person degree. Anyway, thank you so much for your comments. So, my rating for the Vengeance Factor out of 10 is going to be a 9 excellent. And I don't give this 9 lightly. In fact, coming in to this episode, I was sure I was going to give it an 8. And I think I've given this episode an 8 in the past. But I wanted to be honest with myself. And I wanted to not let all the naysayers interfere and be like, well, they say this episode is bad, so therefore I shouldn't give it a 9. I should only give it an 8. And they're going to think I'm ridiculous if I give this episode a 9. So I'm going to give it an 8 to appease them. And subconsciously, part of me thought that. And I was like, no. Absolutely not. That is the wrong way to think of it. I should give my true feelings, my actual rating on this episode, regardless of what others think. And after really thinking about this episode and analyzing it, I think the good far outweighs the bad. In fact, I might even give this episode a 10 had it not been for that stupid shit with Riker killing Yuta when he shouldn't have. But the rest of it is just so good. Like the tragedy, to me, this is what appeals to me. And maybe it doesn't appeal to everyone. I understand that everyone has different cups of tea. But that tragic love story and the way it was portrayed between Yuta and Riker, who I think did amazing acting jobs, really hit me in the feels. And it's something that I really enjoy watching. And I really love this episode for that. And the great world building and, all the complex, the message about how revenge is futile and how it ties into the main thing, and seeing Picard and how great he is at negotiating and seeing the different, mediating that he has to do. Do we look like farmers to you? And all the, great quotes and all the good acting, which overrides the bad acting and any sort of costume problems people may have. I think the Gatherers were a very interesting concept. I'm a bit disappointed we didn't get more of them. And some people are also complaining that, we didn't find out what happened to the Gatherers and the negotiations between Maruk and Chorgon, but we did find out. Picard pointed out at the end, with these Gatherers negotiations out of the way. Now, granted, it was just a throwaway line of dialogue, but I think that's all you need. And I'll tell you why. Because the episode wasn't about, these negotiations. It was about the clan fighting and how useless revenge. That is the theme of the episode, how futile revenge is. And so that wasn't really the point. We didn't need to see them hammer out a treaty. Subsection to section Y and G. I allowed this and you allowed that. Those few scenes we got with them saying, not on the ruling council. That's all you need. That's a representative of how it was difficult for these two sides to come together. but that wasn't the main point of the episode, but it was there for world building and for showing what negotiations are like. But once you get to the meat and potatoes of the episode, then all you need to do is align, like, oh yeah, we worked it all out. You don't need to, like, see Picard and hammer out subsection of, 2 into subsection X, Y. That's boring. Don't show that. I don't want to see that. So I love that. And I think it really worked, and I think this episode made a lot of smart decisions. So yeah. I don't care what others have. I'm giving this episode a 9 out of 10 because I only care about what I can take. Sorry, that didn't quite work. But anyway, that is it for my review of The Vengeance Factor. And so, if you don't think I'm a total freaking moron after watching this episode, you can check out some of my other videos. So, coming up next on my channel, next Saturday, I'll be over on Patreon to do a revisited for the episode of The Defector. So I'll revisit my review for The Defector over on Patreon for my Patreon supporters. And then on Monday, we'll be back here on YouTube with another public new video for The Hunted. And then on Wednesday, I'll be back for another new video for The High Ground. And then on Thursday, back on Patreon for another revisited, this time for the episode Deja Q. So that's what's coming up on my channel, so be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Next Generation, do many more videos on many other Star Trek subjects, as well as many other shows as well. So please be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.